This is quite an honor. I am just pleased as punch that you asked me to be on this episode because I remember I recommended this on Reels of Justice and I had tears in my eyes as I was actually reading it. And then when you came to me and you said you want to discuss it on my show, I was like, fuck yeah, I do. Because I got thoughts. I got lots of thoughts. And as we showed here, I didn't have that many thoughts.
No, we had a solid hour of thoughts on this one.
Lots of tears, lots of thoughts. Go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Lots of digressions that should definitely be cut.
As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Jmike Folson.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show.
Jmike, can you believe it? This is episode 150.
It feels like just yesterday we were being made fun of for talking about Superman case.
That's yes. Yes, nothing like spite to create to be the impetus for a podcast. Spite and a will to live and survive. And that is characteristic of the story of the man for whom many of us grew up believing was Superman. Because today we are discussing Super/Man, the Christopher Reeve story. And to have that conversation, we are joined by Ryan Luis Rodriguez.
I'm here to make fun of you guys for having a podcast about Superman.
Wouldn't be the first.
So, Ryan, thank you so much for coming back to the show. Where do people know you from?
They probably know me from Reels of Justice, that a fake movie court podcast where we have a judge, a jury, a prosecutor, and defender, and we try to determine if a movie is guilty of being a bad movie. Case has been on, God, I don't even know how many times, 3 or 4?
Four at the moment.
Coming up. You're going to do Frozen
5 is coming
2.
up. Frozen 2. I am currently, and I'm gonna promote this one because I think podcast time means that this might be coming out afterwards. But you know what? Fuck
so
it.
When Case won Frozen 2, it was such a great moment for him when he.
No, I'm 4 for 4 currently as of this recording. Specifically, when I came on to prosecute Conan the Barbarian, the Jason Momoa version, it felt like I was taking an easy win. And so like now it's sort of set up the scenario that I'm trying at more and more difficult ones. And so I am going on to prosecute Frozen 2 because my daughter loves this movie and I have watched it way too many times. And I don't care for a lot of things about the movie. And so even though it's a Disney classic that millions of children adore and has fantastic music, I am going to take this movie down, and time will tell. And it's very possible that listeners will be able to just go over to Reels of Justice, subscribe as they should, because Ryan and the crew over there are fantastic, and they'll be able to see if I am in fact 5 for 5.
I think there's a good chance that you will be. I'm just saying, I haven't rewatched the movie yet for the case, but I'm gonna say I'm kind of already on your side. So, except it has the greatest song in the entire franchise. I will give it that.
Well, I got a question then. What are you guys going to do in 5 years when the live action remake comes out? Are you guys going to revisit this?
Oh, hell yes. We're going to have to, because it's going to be controversial, and we never shy away from the controversial, nerdy picks. So, yeah, we're definitely doing the live action Frozen. If we're doing Moana, and we're doing Moana, then we're going to do Frozen for sure.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Absolutely.
There is a live action one coming out. So are you guys going to do that one too?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah. But suffice to say, Reels of Justice is a fantastic show. People should go check it out. You also have, of course, One Track Mind.
Yes, I do. It's a podcast where we look at film through the prism of audio commentaries. Case is a loyal supporter of the show, and I'm always glad to have him holding up my back. And he's been on, I think, twice.
Yep, I believe so.
He did Going Greek. That was the first one. What was the second one?
Oh, Batman.
Oh, that's right. The
66
Batman. Yeah. Great episodes. Absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, so wonderful stuff. And so the running theme of it being movies and thus a connecting tie-in to get us back onto the subject of today's episode, which is that we are discussing the Christopher Reeve documentary. And so this is gonna get emotional at some points here. Like I think that we're talking about a man who is one, already deceased, two, was infamous for a terrible accident that beset him and the ramifications of that, and then three, was also known for being like
Superman,
a superhero.
You mean,
yeah.
What do you mean?
There's a 60% chance that I will cry during this podcast, and I apologize if that happens.
How would this ever be emotional, Case? It's not like we have very fresh memories of all this stuff happening in our lifetimes, and we're very much there when it all happened and went down.
Yeah, so that's an area that we should kind of start with. Like, so this is the biggest part of this, because like Reeve passed away much more recently, but at that point he had become a public figure for his advocacy. But it was sad, but it was I'm not.
It wasn't unexpected.
Yeah, exactly. It was always like once the accident happened, it was always like, oh, like you're not sure how long he had anyway. It felt like a ticking clock.
The pendulum.
Yeah, but the accident,
Mm-hmm.
the accident was this major moment that happened in our lifetime. Like I was 11 at the time, and Jmike, you were what, 7?
Yeah,
I was 9.
Ryan, how old? 9. Yeah. So right in the middle between us. So like we all remember this. Like I remember being at my grandparents' house and watching the news there. I don't know why specifically, but like it wasn't like the first part of the story. It wasn't like me being told that it happened. It was like, once it had happened and me watching like more coverage of it. But I remember that like very vividly. Jmike, what are your memories of this?
I remember my mom telling me about it. Because I was big into Superman, the animated show and everything. And then she was watching the news one day and she was like, oh my gosh, Superman's paralyzed. And I was like, what? And because you understand what's going on, but it doesn't fully hit you until you get older. So you're like, oh, that's unfortunate in your kid mind. And you like kind of gloss over it. You keep going. But not like actually sitting there and watching it. And you're like, oh. And all the ramifications and hearing all the stuff that actually happened from the accident till he got to the hospital. While he was there in the hospital, you're like, oh crap, that was a whole lot of stuff happening.
Yeah. Ryan, how about you? Like any specific memories about like when it occurred?
Yeah, I had, as I was telling you guys before we started recording, I had never seen any of the Superman movies. I didn't actually see the first Superman until I was 16. Like that's how like divorced I was from most pop culture that came up before I was born. I usually got to it very late. But even then, I saw it on the news at my house, and it struck me with this idea of, I know who this guy is. I know who he played. I know his importance in popular culture. But all I really got out of it was Superman is never going to walk again. And that was something that devastated me as a very, very feeling autistic child. It is something that just resonated with me. And when they show the news footage in the documentary of all these different channels covering him going to the hospital and getting switched out for like rebreathers and all this stuff, and it brought everything crashing home, and it hit me really emotionally, especially this time around.
Yeah, the footage that they show that actually was of the time, like the news coverage of it, like really just like took me right back to that moment there. So so we're gonna talk about the movie. We're kind of gonna go through it, and thus it's sort of a conversation about like who Christopher Reeve was. The movie is structured in this way where they're using the available footage that they reference Reeve's past career, like, but much of it through the lens of him like flashing back from his time like being paralyzed and reflecting on his life, which I have to imagine happened from interviews that they got like afterwards.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't like what they did with the Val Kilmer documentary where they recreated his voice with AI. They definitely didn't do that here. This is definitely every single little soundbite you get from Christopher Reeve is genuine and comes from the actual man.
Yeah. One thing I found fascinating just before we get into this is that the serendipity of some of his portrayals that happened in terms of getting footage to sort of emulate what's going on in his story. So like specifically, like they have footage from like Rear Window, like the remake that he did where like he wakes up like paralyzed from the neck down. And so that they have these dramatizations of it that he's acting it out. And that's like insane to think about.
It's almost like they were planning a documentary from the very beginning. And they're just like, okay, well, we need to have him make this kind of movie so we can have this reaction. We need to have him make this kind of movie so we could do this. But it's happenstance that this is just how chronologically his life unfolded.
Right. Just wild stuff. I mean, and like also coincidentally, and I don't think they used the footage or any footage from this because I believe he was like a paraplegic in this, but the exact role he did before his accident, he was playing a person who had an accident and was left as a paraplegic.
They talked about it for a little bit.
Yeah, they showed a little clip of it.
Yeah. Where he was, his thinking before his accident was like, oh, sure, I'm glad it's not going to be me anytime, like, at all, blah, blah, blah. And then he reflected on it after the accident, and he was like, that was really, like, bad of me to think that way because, like, one moment, one bad turn, one accident, and that's going to be me.
The amazing thing that I was kind of taken aback by is that they didn't use the clips of him from Smallville in any capacity, which is weird because that's a Superman show. And he played, I believe, Dr. Curtis Swan, if I remember correctly. And that was the one thing I was waiting for the entire documentary, and they never used it. And I was genuinely surprised by that.
Yeah, I also was surprised that there was no use of that footage, just because it would also be,
it's legacy
part of this. Yeah, part of the story of what he did coming out of it, or like how he fought to be able to continue to be an actor, even though that like so much of himself had been taken away from him. One thing I also appreciate about this movie is that it doesn't shy away from the more controversial aspects of Christopher Reeve. The fact that he was a human being who had decisions that weren't necessarily the best and comes from a background that has its own issues. It opens with like a discussion of like Reeve's dad and like who I feel confident in using the phrase it could be described as a douchebag, like just a very hard, but this apparent socialite, like poet, I believe, right?
Yeah, I think that's how it was, like poet, author, and something else, and how he was really, really hard on him, and it was really kind of like disappointing when he said he took the role of Superman. And I was like, oh wow, that's
it's definitely rough. Not a hagiography. Like, it's not sitting there saying, and he was the greatest guy and he had the greatest life and everything was great and then everything went to shit. It's kind of like, no, he's a complicated person. He has he had multifacets like we all do. And it never sits there and tries to glorify the man. They pay tribute to him, but they never sit there and go, but he was just the most perfect person on the face of the earth.
Right. Yeah. And that, some of that is good to support. Some of that is interesting to sort of see the reasons for, like, I think some of the stories about like Christopher Reeve being arrogant during the production of the original Superman, those stories like circle around, and it is interesting to see the other areas where, he was a flawed human being and also kind of a daredevil. Like I found it interesting where it's like, oh yeah, like while shooting Superman on weekends, he would just like go gliding. I'm like, yeah, no, this is a man who I'm not saying that like, well, what did you expect in terms of like getting into horseback riding or anything like that? But like, he definitely put himself into situations that were, more, risky.
The only thing more appropriate would be if they got footage of him leaning his head out of the plane as he's gliding, going, "I'll never die!" Woo!
Yeah. I didn't find that one that bad because I was like, okay, he must be getting inspiration for the whole flying thing. I was like, okay, I can definitely see him. I was like, it's risky.
Sure.
Like, I would never in my lifetime would I ever do that. But I was like, okay, he must be trying to get inspiration or something. He was definitely like a live your life to the fullest type of person. Every 5 seconds.
Yeah, like they got that great shot of him like shouting like Carpe Diem. Yeah. I also want to bring up like that it's interesting how much footage we actually got in this movie. You know, like there is a lot of behind the scenes footage that they're able to mine from.
And photos and just a whole mess of background materials that generally I've never seen. And I've watched all the documentaries on all the Superman movies on all those discs, and there's a surprising amount of stuff that is just was never disclosed until now.
Yeah.
Like learning his relationship with Robin Williams, I think was the most surprising thing to me.
Yeah.
Learning that they both went to Juilliard, which is just amazing that Robin Williams went to Juilliard. That's the strangest thing in the world. But
roommates.
Yeah. And then at the end, but the thing that killed me was, I forget who says it, but they said that if Chris was still alive, Robin would be too.
Oh yeah, that was good and close.
I know that was the heavy bit.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Tears just streaming out of my eyes. I was a mess. Utter mess.
So I knew about the Robin Williams thing in terms of them being friends and roommates and the Juilliard stuff together. But yeah, like to show how close they are and then to like say that, man, it was like, wow, that is a lot to put on your audience.
Yeah.
Because I never knew they were that close. Like I'd seen in interviews and things, a couple of things here or there, they were like joking around, like, oh, they must be friends. Like everyone like in Hollywood has acquaintances and stuff, but I didn't know they were that close. And I was like, wow, this is pretty cool-ish.
Yeah, I knew that, and I feel like that was like one of those like just like internet trivia bits, like a cracked article or something.
5 people who roomed with Robin Williams in Juilliard. You'll never guess who number 3 is.
But I think it might have been like the 5 roommate situations or something like that. Because there's all the because there are a lot of those like weird ones, like Tommy Lee Jones and Al Gore.
Well, that one makes sense. That one, if you just think about it, it makes total sense. They're very similar people. Tommy Lee Jones has always looked like he was 95. Al Gore has always been terminally unhip. You know, it makes sense.
Yeah.
They rub off on each other.
I loved seeing the interviews with Jeff Daniels.
Yeah.
About the casting process. It struck me when they're discussing like going out for Superman and stuff, where it's like, oh man, Jeff Daniels was like a young actor with like both Christopher Reeve and William Hurt. And now they're both like gone. Like, and it, you know, that's so weird to like think about like actors who are not in my mind as like old yet, having to start facing like their friends dying off.
Yeah.
And both of whom have been in huge comic book franchises.
Yes, also that. I was going to bring up that William Hurt saying like you're selling out, and then I'm like, but you're in the MCU, motherfucker.
I guess Chris gave him his go ahead. You're like, oh, if he can do it, I can definitely try this out too.
What do I do? Put on a mustache and yell at a green thing? Yeah, sure, why not? Let's do it.
Yeah, that was very fun. It gave me like Fame flashbacks.
Yeah, I didn't know. Like, it's always cool to see like people and like the people they come in contact with, but I didn't know so many people were so close to Christopher Reeve. It was like the amount of circles that he was in his early acting career.
Yeah, because like his like publicity peaked in such a specific way, and then you know he never had anything that got anywhere near as big as Superman. You forget that he was a big part of the theater scene. So all these actors like Susan Sarandon or Whoopi Goldberg, like so like all these actors who like did a lot of stuff in New York. Yeah, they just all knew each other. They were all friends.
They were super friends. Sorry, I had to. It was just hanging there. I just had to.
Yeah. And now, I love that I love this footage, and we've seen it before, but I love seeing the initial test footage with Chris Reeve having like the giant like pit stains. It's always fun to see. What's, less fun to see is the growing friction that Reeve has with his first, partner, the mother of his first two children.
Yeah, I didn't know about that.
Yeah, so that I had never really like paid much attention because like Dana Reeve is like so famous from being his caretaker and being like the person who like really like ran the Christopher Reeve Foundation
and died tragically.
And died tragically. So so I never really like paid attention to the fact that like, oh, he had multiple children from different women. Didn't never really like paid attention to that part. I've just never really been that invested in his like whole history until I was watching this movie. And this is an area where like where he like has some of his limits. Like he when Superman 4 was sort of like the nadir of his career, that he just kind of walked away from his family. And that's, frustrating to see because, it didn't feel like it kind of felt like like he blindsided them with it.
Yeah. And it was such a personal movie to him too, as well.
Yeah.
He wrote the story to it.
Yeah.
And to see that was his reaction to it was not only to be like, I'm never playing this character again, but like, I got to cut some people out of my life. That was kind of a surprise.
Right. Yeah. Especially like, my hot take is like, I actually like Superman 4.
It's better than Superman 3. I'll give it that. Because it has something to say.
I feel like it's a Neptune Pluto situation where it can kind of like alternate like in terms of like which one's the worst in my mind, but like it does have something to say, and like it does have good moments in that. Like for a long time, like my like Facebook like wallpaper was like the scene from the UN with Superman like walking out like triumphantly. Like there is like a really like optimistic message, and it is Reeve's message. So it's, it's frustrating where reality hits its limits.
Yeah.
Can't believe like you guys in Superman 4. I'll never forgive you for that one either, Case. Oh, the amount of movies Case has made me watch.
But you're still here. And
barely.
That's what matters. You're
Wonder
still
Woman
here.
almost
still
took
fighting.
me out.
150 episodes in, we are still here. We are still going for
Wonder Woman almost took me out. Those crazy Wonder Woman episodes. Whew.
Oh, did you watch the ones where she's in World War II? And then all of a sudden in season 2, they're like, yeah, not anymore. And now she's in regular times. And are we going to explain it? No.
Her spy movie, the pilot. I was like,
where she's like interrogating the guy that cloned Adolf Hitler. Remember that one quite memorably.
There was also the failed 60s pilot where she has weird delusions into a mirror.
What about the David E. Kelly pilot? Oh boy. Where she's a lawyer by day and Wonder Woman by night. Oh.
Yeah, so we watched them all. We watched many things. We also watched this documentary to circle us back here. So I want to talk about Dana Reeve for a minute because she's really cool. And like one thing that this movie really hit home is that she was amazing.
Yeah.
Like that this is a woman who stood by a man in what is incredibly hard. Like I have been a caretaker for someone, in this case, my grandfather, who was a senior citizen with dementia, and I was not alone in doing so. And it was very difficult. And that was still with a person who could move about, even if it was in a limited capacity. Like for the amount of care that you have to give to this person, like that is like just an incredible load. And then to use it to create this transformative cause and to spearhead like using the tragedy here, but to turn that into a source of hope for so many people, to provide federal funding for research into these kinds of injuries, to advance like what we have, like the surgical procedures, the recovery methods. Like, so much has been advanced because of, yes, Christopher Reeve, but Dana Reeve really pushing that forward. And this movie really hammers home that like she wasn't like a homewrecker. She came into his life after he had already separated, and had a good relationship with the kids, had a good relationship with Gay, and then took this on, and then it's so tragic the way she passes away, seemingly coincidentally right after Christopher.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and of a disease that she did not fit the bill for. Like, she died of lung cancer, but she never smoked.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things. It's like, it was a kind of death that is usually only relegated to certain types of behaviors. And she didn't exhibit those behaviors. And that was kind of like doubly insulting. It's like, first we're going to take Chris from you. Now we're going to take this woman who has done nothing but good for the past 20 years. Why? Why not?
She was
it's just
44.
one of those things that is just, it hurts. It still hurts.
I look back at it and I was like, oh man, she must have been almost, no, she was 44 when she died. And it was like, holy crap. And she was doing all of this, taking care of him all those years just for her to die of lung cancer. Spontaneously.
Yeah. And then the impact on William, their son. I mean, the impact on everyone, but like specifically, like for Will Reeve to lose both parents,
become an orphan.
So
so hard.
And like, he was giving his like point of view from when they got the phone call. It came in and he was pretending to be asleep, but he heard them say that his mom had passed. And I was like, I hate your case. Oh God.
I
didn't want to cry today. But I was like, oh man, I don't know what I would have done if I'd heard that, had that phone call happen to me.
I know I never would have recovered. If that happened, I mean, if that happens tomorrow, both my parents are 70, so I've been prepared for it for a long time. But if this were 20 years ago, I would never recover. Just flat out wouldn't. And I know that for a fact.
Yeah, it's something that unfortunately all too many people have had to deal with. But yeah, it's a pain that, I thankfully can only imagine, but it would be terrible. Now, the children did step into the roles within the company and have taken a leadership role as a result, and have continued to do incredible work using their father's legacy. So it is a very impressive continuing foundation.
Hey, it was they said like because of him they've used all those things to help people start giving people the ability to walk through all the research and things they funded. And I was like, oh wow, I didn't know that had happened. Like, I wasn't aware of the foundation like going that far and being that active in that community anymore. Because you never really hear about it.
Yeah, after the initial like launch of it, like how often are you like really getting that in the news? Yeah, I do remember when Reeve started to have those like signs of improvement thanks to stem cells. That was like seeing it here. It felt like, oh man, we were so cheated of like potential like further recovery, and it would have been miraculous recovery, but like not from the vantage point of it, like at that point where he was like the evangelist for stem cells. I kind of forgot like what that like South Park used that as like a big parody.
One of their worst episodes. And one of the most offensive things I think they've ever done, and not like in a "can you believe what they got away with," but in a way of like, now you're just being shitty. Like now you're literally punching down, and there's no reason to do that whatsoever.
Yeah. It gets into it also gets into like this documentary has a lot more John Kerry than I expected. And it's amazing to think about like that window of like, oh yeah, when the foundation was like actually doing a lot of good, it did have this like public face. It did have like it was in like political news.
And if you've ever wanted to see John Kerry cry on camera, watch this movie.
Yeah.
Because it happens. And I'm right there with him.
Once again, I didn't know like his circle of people was that big. Like he go, oh, I've met such and such and such, and they were cool. But like, no, he was really that much of an impact on the lives of the people around him. And they really loved and cared deeply for him.
I have to say, I want to talk a little bit about the structure of this movie. I was very impressed with the overall editing, the way that they unfolded the story, like the way that they introduce people, the way that, like, for example, I was doing a partial rewatch today before we got on, and I was reflecting how, it's really nice that they like set up the kids, and then we get the interviews for the kids, and then like they save Gay for later because it's going to be more impactful for her story to like come about at the time that it does. Like if you weren't familiar with her, like I wasn't, you're like, oh wow, who's this person, and then like it's Christopher Reeve himself who answers that question.
Yeah, it's remarkably well put together. And you got to consider like the fact that they had 40 years of footage to sift through. Some of it fictional, some of it just archival news programs, some of it interviews. It is a Herculean task to put something like this together. And they must have been working on it for years. Because you look at somebody like Michael Moore, like his first two movies, it took him like 3 years to do both. And it's basically the entire time those movies are just him walking in front of a camera going, hey, isn't this silly? Hey, isn't America crazy for doing this? But here they have so much to comb through. And yet it does not feel like an hour and 40 minutes. No. It feels like 55 at the most. Like it is a brisk watch for as emotionally punishing as it is. It passes by in an instant, which is really amazing considering how much had to be consolidated.
Yeah, I mean, it's fortunate that they have like the kids to use for interviews that I'm sure were structured in a way to provide the framework of this movie. There's no like narrator in the movie, but they use the interviews as ways to sort of weave the story together. And so, yeah, like I figure that the kids are like kind of the go-tos where it's like the question where it's like, we just need you to talk about this subject for a minute. And then, you know, they get something, and then they use whatever happens to be the best bits. What did you guys think of? Oh, sorry.
I was going to say the one part about all the interviews that tied them all together was that throughout the movie, there is this image of like a stone Christopher Reeve floating in the universe. And like how when he's going through like his upgrade and everything, like different cracks and things start to appear on the statue of Superman. But when he has his accident, there's this huge like line of kryptonite that it starts at his neck and kind of like spreads down his entire spine. And like kind of throughout the rest of the movie, like it sort of heals, but not completely. But like the music gets to be more uplifting when it comes back on screen, and it starts to like rotate and move, and like behind him, almost at the entire time of the movie, there's this huge constellation of like red stars behind him that forms his cape. And I think that's an awesome piece of storytelling right there.
Thank you for bringing that up, because that's exactly what I wanted to discuss. So yeah, I thought that was a really cool visual thing to use, you know, kind of as B-roll, but kind of as storytelling. You know, like you pointed out, like it's very evocative when the crack occurs. It's a way of showing when the accident happens. Like this boom, this actual like injury kind of to it, and the explosion of kryptonite out of it, and they could like reposition and frame it and do things like, you know, like you alluded to, like putting it in front of the star field and playing like the big bombastic music, or doing like close-ups to show like when things are getting bad and the cracks are getting worse. I thought it was a really interesting device, you know, just to give this like narrative through line in the whole movie.
And I love that they introduce it as something that is just there for the opening credits, like something just to visualize what you're going through, and then uses it as a visual metaphor throughout. Whereas most documentaries probably would have just saved it for the opening credits and then never gotten back to it.
Right. And clearly, like, a lot of thought is going into how the story is being told. And like I said, there's no narrator in this, but they are using these augmented visual elements to give you very like sensory kind of responses. You know, again, we're talking about the cracks. We're talking about the way the music really plays with it all. Like, if anything is trying to just like project onto like feel this thing, the sequences with the statue are really like there for that.
It kind of feels like it's its own like chapter by chapter piece of like how different things have affected the statue throughout his life.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So it starts off like pristine, and then he starts being Superman. The music gets really bombastic, like the cape pops in, like it's an aerial view in space of around the statue, and then like when he has his accent, like I said, like the first crack starts popping up on like the side of the neck, and it spreads. And I was like, oh, I'm not gonna cry. Like this is really intense, and it really, he said, it really gets you like feel this thing type of storytelling.
Yeah. Look, this is a hard movie to watch in that regard. Like it makes you really feel the pain and really feel for Reeve in those moments. It
does all that without being tragedy porn too, which is the most remarkable thing about it.
Yeah.
Is that it presents you a human story. It's not about like, and then this terrible thing happened, and then this one, oh my God, aren't we so traumatized by it? It lets things unfold the way that they naturally do. And it really, it gets to you, but it doesn't pummel you into submission.
Yeah, really the only spot where it kind of feels like that is right when it first like goes into the accident, and then it goes into like the whole like the tubes could pop out and you could suffocate, which is a scene from Rear Window. But and I'm wondering if it ever actually happened or if it was just his anxiety. But like to talk about the anxiety portion of it is interesting. Like the fears that he had in those early days versus like how he like adapted to it through rehab and therapy. Like that is, you know, that the mental health component is something that I don't think like a documentary would have gone into 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you know, like it just would have been like, and he rallied around his, his iron will as Superman. Like, you know,
it could have been more propagandist in the wrong hands. And the way that it lands, it definitely benefits from the distance of time. Had this been made within 3 years of him dying, it definitely would have been a different story. But with the benefit of context and the benefit of hindsight, it makes it a more affecting and more true story.
Yeah, so certainly one that is more in touch with itself, like able to show the strengths and the flaws and the things that are actually like really beautiful because of coming out of those flaws. You know, like there's certainly something to be said for like the like the disabled community's reaction to Reeve becoming an advocate only upon being injured himself, and I understand that point of view. But on the other hand, it is a transformational experience that actually, you know, coming from being sort of like, shall we say, like, I don't know, it kind of feels like a biblical thing, you know, like some prodigal son who like upon his being humbled becomes this like, you know, saintly figure.
brought low by the cosmos.
Yeah.
And it can't be discounted, like, the good that he did. Like, you know, like him going into, what was it, the Oscars the year after his accident?
Yeah.
Like that scene where, like, you know, there's this huge like standing ovation for him, you know, that it's this huge deal. Like, he had this presence and he had this cachet that he could have applied to, like, he could have only applied it to so many things because of the nature of the accident, but he could direct it. Like, he could be this force magnifier for anyone who was trying to do good work in this space. Like, and that can't be, you know, that can't be denied. It's like the people who argue that LeBron James, for example, is actually, like, underpaid because of, like, how important he is as a basketball player and as a sports figure, and in terms of, like, the amount of revenue he actually generates. Like, Reeve was that for specifically, like, this kind of activism. All right, so I feel like we have come through most of the documentary. Is there any, like, major thing that we haven't discussed? Ryan, you're our guest. Anything that you wanted to get to that we have not gone into?
Can I bring up something that is not in the documentary that I wanted to discuss?
Absolutely.
Because when I saw in your notes of the portrayal of Superman and how that made him stand out from other portrayals, the TV show Supergirl, when it came out in 2015, for the entire first season, they kept teasing Superman appearing in the show, but they never showed his face or his body. He was always obscured or shot dirty, meaning shot out of focus in the background. And my thought was, the entire first season, when we finally see Superman, it needs to be Christopher Reeve, because he is the only Superman as far as I'm concerned. And then they didn't go in that direction with season 2. Literally immediately in season 2, they have Tyler Hoechner. Is that how you pronounce his last name?
Hoechlin. Yeah.
Who's very good in the role, but I was just quite disappointed that it wasn't Christopher Reeve, although the only way to do that would be to recreate him with CGI, and look what happened in The Flash. Nobody was too happy about that, so we didn't do it. But for me, it was one of those things where it's like, it was kind of a missed opportunity, but I was really hoping that would come up in the documentary, because that show is incredibly reverent for the character, and the character is definitely inspired by his performance in those 4 movies.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about at this point all of the Christopher Reeve Superman movies as individual episodes, and in fact, going back to the Christopher Reeve Superman movie, was the first one was episode 3, I believe, of Men of Steel.
What was episode 1?
Episode 1 was an introductory episode discussing. No, actually, no. I take it back. Wasn't episode 1 the Superman movie? And then we did Silver Age as number 2, or did we do Silver Age as number 1? Now I'm going to have to look this up.
Right now. Yeah, it was Silver Age Superman was number 1. And Superman the movie was number 2.
Not bad.
Yeah, because I remember that, like, our first episode was us discussing, like, our general thoughts on Superman in a lot of ways. And at the time, at the time, Jeff Moonen was going to be more of a regular host as opposed to just a guest on the show. And so we wanted to sort of, like, figure out, like, what our baseline of, like, Superman kind of thoughts were. Yeah, so we did Silver Age Superman as number 1, and then we did the Superman the movie as episode 2.
When did you do 2?
2 was a bit later, because when we got the show going, we wanted to make sure that we got episodes out for both Captain Marvel and Shazam.
Okay.
So episode 3 ended up being like a primer on Captain Marvel, who I consider a Superman analog, and so it made sense. And then we did, like, coverage of that movie. What's making you laugh?
It's like we did the covers. Yeah, we talked about that for a while too.
Yeah, so it was a while before we came back to.
How many you did the Richard Donner set?
We talked about both.
Good.
Yeah. So that was episode 27. So we have done pretty big gaps between, like, the series, and so it's fitting that. So it's fitting that episode 150 is us doing then the documentary that's on, like effectively the definitive Superman movie series.
Yeah, like we did Superman 3 and we did Superman Returns, and I think there was like a year and a half in between.
Yeah, I mean, which is fine. Like it's given us a chance to sort of revisit the franchise with fresh eyes, as opposed to just trying to like cram it all into like together.
Right.
And so looking here, Reeve was so good in his role. Like, they do the scene that everyone talks about from Superman 1 where he's like ready to like tell Lois, and he like transforms like his body and like his posture. Like he like stands upright and his voice shifts. And then like at that point he like realizes like, nope, never mind. And like he shifts back into Clark,
grabs his glasses
and like puts his glasses back on, and you can really hear in his voice like just how different of a character he is, and like we've discussed that before, but it's so nice circling back to that and just like adoring what an actor Reeve was, like what he brought to this role. Because like when you like on paper, aside from the fact that he was tall, he wasn't necessarily the obvious Superman.
Right. No. I mean, like they auditioned everybody, including the casting director's dentist. So he was not, nobody went in that going, get us a Christopher Reeve type. That was never part of the discussion. He just happened to emerge as the best. I mean, they wanted Robert Redford. They wanted so many different crazy people. They wanted Dustin Hoffman. Like, what? Oh,
yeah.
No.
It's wild every time you look at, like, I mean, we've talked about Superman both on this and then on another pass we discussed, like we went into like some of the backgrounds of the casting and all that, but it is a wild behind the scenes movie. Also, like just to say this aloud, because they don't go into that much coverage in this movie, the production of Superman 1 and 2 was fucking batshit. like just need to say that part just again. And if you're not clear on what I'm talking about, like go on Wikipedia, look up the Salkind clause, and start there.
Start with the Three Musketeers.
So those are the people who produced this movie, and the reason they shot it where they shot it was because they were wanted by Interpol in certain parts of the world.
And now, from now on, and ever since the Three Musketeers and the Four Musketeers were split from one movie into two, there is now, as Kay said, the Salkind clause in every actor's contract that makes sure that if you make two movies, you get paid for two movies.
Because these were the kinds of people who just sort of tried to like cut the sharpest of deals possible. It is rather wild. The only person who got paid on time regularly during the production of Superman and Superman 2 was the actor who played Non.
Jack O'Halloran.
Jack O'Halloran, who it was not only a giant, menacing, fucking terrifying human being, regularly speaking, he was also mobbed up as fuck. Like the kind of person who could like walk or who could park wherever he wanted, not get any tickets, go wherever he wanted because he was just well connected. And if you tried to threaten him, like you were going to die.
He was the first person I'd ever heard talk shit about Christopher Reeve on the Superman 3 episode of How Did This Get Made? He's one of the special guests with Damon Lindelof. And he talks about how pompous and arrogant Superman, how Christopher Reeve was. And I'm like, well, considering the source, I'll just have to take that with a grain of salt. Like, I'm sure he wasn't perfect, but I don't know if he's as bad as you're making me think he is.
Yeah, I heard that episode too. And like that's why I was like, I've heard that Reeve was like kind of arrogant at the time. But and I don't know. He also strikes me as the kind of person who doesn't like give any bullshit. So I actually like kind of buy that take, but it's really funny. And like the thing is that kind of shit was just part of the production of Superman 1 and 2. It is rather insane that any of that got made. And Reeve is a big part of why it ultimately worked. I mean, for example, they talk about like when it goes flying for the first time
banks.
And like he banks. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yes. Like, and just as an acting choice right there. And like, oh yeah, this is an incredible performance that made this role work when it really shouldn't have when you get into it.
Yeah, definitely.
Jmike, was there anything that you wanted to make sure that we addressed?
I think we covered it. Like I said, the thing that kept taking me out was like they talk about like his early life. They take a break and talk about Superman the movie. They come back and talk about like how it was after he had the accident, and then they talk about the movie again. But it was like to me the most important part was like I was most focused on the statue of Christopher Reeve in space. And I was like, and how they were using it to tell the actual story of what was going on with him.
I just love that they were using footage from Somewhere in Time and Death Trap, which I think are his two other brilliant performances other than Superman.
I was like, this is so cool. It is, like you said, it's paying not really reverence, but they're giving acknowledgement to the good that he did before and after.
It was ignored.
Yeah. I was like, that's really important for people to see.
Like, he had to constantly prove, no, I'm not just Superman, I'm an actor. I went to Juilliard. I know my shit. And people are just like, sure, whatever you say, go fly away, flyboy.
Whatever you say, Superman. It's kind of like how Charlton Heston was either like Moses or like Ben-Hur for everybody. But he did a lot of other stuff in between, like Planet of the Apes and Tombstone. But like, no one ever knows. Everyone's like, oh, snap is Moses.
All right. So, Ryan, thank you so much for coming and for bringing this movie and for being our guest for episode 150.
This is quite an honor. I am just pleased as punch that you asked me to be on this episode, because I remember I recommended this on Reels of Justice, and I had tears in my eyes as I was actually reading it. And then when you came to me and you said you want to discuss it on my show, I was like, fuck yeah, I do. Because I got thoughts. I got lots of thoughts. And as we showed here, I didn't have that many thoughts.
No, we had a solid hour of thoughts on this one.
Lots of tears, lots of thoughts. Go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Lots of digressions that should definitely be cut.
But yeah, so once again, where can people find you, follow you? What have you got going on?
Well, you can find Reels of Justice at Reels of Justice on Instagram, and unfortunately, they're still on Twitter and Facebook. We have a great Facebook page with a great. We frequently react to and conversate with our fans and our listeners, which is always fun. And then for One Track Mind, it's the numeral 1 Track Mind podcast on Instagram. One Track Mind, that is the ONE Track Mind at bsky.social. And you can find me on Facebook, Podchaser, or check out the official Patreon page, patreon.com/One Track Mind podcast, where you can get every episode a week early and uncut and commercial free. And you have 300 hours of bonus content, including every episode of the Coolness Chronicles and the Shirley Chronicles, back when those were a thing. And now my dog is barking in the background, and I'm sure everyone's going to hear it. It's delightful.
It's all
Thank
good.
you,
People
Buster.
should absolutely check out your stuff. People should say that Buster is a good dog regardless, because who's a good boy?
He's no crypto, but he's okay. We love him.
Yeah. But yeah, no, people should check out both One Track Mind and Reels. They're great shows. Again, I've been on both, and I've been a supporter of both. And then people should be paying attention to Reels for when I inevitably crush Frozen 2. But then after that, they should try to find us. Jmike, where can they find you and follow you?
I've been trying to banish the other site as far away as possible.
The site that shall not be named.
Yeah, but you can find me over at j5.bluesky.social. I'm over there looking at things, posting things, having fun, getting made fun of by Case, all the good stuff.
Also, you could the Discord.
Oh yeah, also on our Men of Steel channel on Discord.
Yeah, people should check out the Discord for Certain POV. It's fantastic. We have a ton of active channels going on right now. Movie discussions have been really active. We recently added sports, which has been taken over very heavily by the wrestling community. So that's been an active.
You're asking for trouble with that
thread.
But
it's been very polite so far.
Chairs gonna be thrown.
But on that note, you can find me at the Discord server. You can find me on the Blue Sky at caseaiken.bluesky.social. You can find me on Instagram at Quetzalcoatl5 because I'm holding on to my AIM screen name for dear life. And those are the places you should find me. You can find the stuff that we are working on, Jmike. This is big news for everyone. We've got a Patreon.
Oh my God.
It's finally launched because it was trying for a long time. We were trying to be like, do we do another pass Patreon and a Men of Steel? And we decided, no, we're just going to do one. We're just going to do one that covers another pass, Men of Steel, and anything else that I happen to be working on. So, and we figured out how it all works. So we're good. People should come support it. It's at patreon.com/certain POV media. And so what that is, it is covering things that are what are considered certain POV productions, as opposed to stuff that are part of the certain POV podcast network. So things like Fun and Games with Matt and Geoff, that's a show that joined the network. That is not a thing that was produced by Certain POV. Another Pass and Men of Steel were produced by Certain POV. So that's the distinction right there. If anyone's kind of curious about that one. But we have a bunch of executive producer tier people that we need to thank. And so I would like to thank Carter Hout, Sean Muir, Lee Greger, Memento Young, Logan Crowley, Joe Mastropiero, Nancy and Casey Aiken, Adam Samter, and Keith Lettinen. These are wonderful people who are the first 10 to join. Now, we do have a free tier now where you can get all kinds of cool stuff. We've got a bunch of essays that I've written so far as bonus content. We're going to get more content out there, and we're going to try to have it at the very least premiere on the Patreon. But definitely to check out the essays I've been doing. I've been just like active in my brain and firing off thoughts about cool stuff. All of that is available even at the free tier. We'd love support on this one and make the podcast better. That would be cool, right, Jmike? that would be pretty cool. But yeah, aside from that, you should also, speaking of the Certain POV podcast network, we should also give some shout outs to the new shows that have joined the network, because our friends Jim and Jay, who are big Legion of Superheroes fans, have launched Long Live the Legion, and that has become a show that is a Certain POV podcast. As well as We Have Issues, which is Keith Lettinen's podcast, has joined Certain POV, the podcast network.
I love the way that you say that almost derisively. The podcast network.
Podcast.
It's certainly not derisively, as this is all my baby. This is all these are all my babies. I love all the shows in the network. There are just certain shows that I'm directly paying for, and that is the difference, right?
But seriously, of all your babies, there is that one baby that gives you the weird look, and you got to go, damn that baby. Damn it.
Yeah, you know who you are. Ryan, thank you again for coming on. It's always a blast having you. I always feel like I want to make sure that you think I'm cool because of the Coolness Chronicles. But no, I really appreciate having you come on. It's always a blast having you.
It's always an honor to be here. I am here literally whenever. I'll watch whatever crappy Wonder Woman TV movie you want me to watch. Doesn't matter to me.
I think we're good on the Wonder Womans at the moment. We did what, 3 months of it. It was an intense run. Wonder Woman. Anyway, we're getting loopy here. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Jmike. Thank you, listeners. Thank you for being here for 150 episodes. It is so cool that we are going that long. We didn't realize that this was 150 until we actually were about to start the episode. But I can't think of a better topic for it. So this was great. And otherwise, stay super, man.
Men of Steel is a Certain POV production. Our hosts are Jmike Folson and Case Aiken. The show is edited by Sophia Ricciardi. Our logo is by Chris Batista, and episode art is by Case Aiken. Our theme is by Geoff Moonen.
Video games are a unique medium.
They can tell stories,
Immerse us in strange, fantastic worlds.
blur the very boundaries of our reality.
But at the end of the day, video games are fun. Whatever fun is to you.
I'm Geoff Moonen,
And I am Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
and on Fun and Games, we talk about the history, trends, and community of video games.
It's a celebration of all the games we play and all the fun we find within them.
And there's so many more games out there, so we hope you'll share in that conversation with us.
Fun and Games podcast with Matt and Geoff. Find us on certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
And happy gaming.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.